Hello and welcome to the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. I am Tate Hieronymus. I am your host. And tonight I am joined with a good fellow that I met at the film site for the 50th anniversary of the Patterson Gimlin film, Jeffery Thomas. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, Tate. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, I can't complain. It's a hot and humid day down here in Florida. I finally moved. For the people listening, I've been talking about it, but I'm finally here. Where are you located at, Jeffrey?
I am in Augusta, Georgia, and it's interesting you talk about you're in Florida. Right now, Hurricane Sally, as we speak, is hitting, the eye is still at Gulf Shores, Alabama. It's pummeling Pensacola, and it's raining here. Same storm. It's pouring down rain here. It's the exact same storm, and it's headed our way.
Oh, okay. So I was talking to somebody that I know up by Tallahassee, and they were saying, "Oh, we might change plans going squatching because it's been raining here." I was like, "Why is it raining there?" But that makes sense.
It's that big. It's literally that big to where it's down there in Pensacola where the eye is, and yet here in Augusta, Georgia, which is by car easily a 7-hour trip because we did it last year for Bill Drain Guinness's memorial service. It's about 7 hours, and yet it's pouring down rain here from the same storm. That
far inland, that's insane. Yeah. I would never. That's a big storm, to be quite honest.
They all are. The last one that came through, we got the clouds and rain from it as well, which the good thing about it is we're on the top side of it, so it's bringing cooler temps here. It's been like it has been in Florida here in the high 80s and even some days in the 90s, and the humidity's just been stifling. But now today we woke up and it was in the 60s this morning, and it felt great. But now we have to go through the rain for the next 3 days.
Yeah, we've been getting rain like down here every day, but I don't know if it's because of the hurricane or not. I think that's further north.
No, that's just Florida. It rains every day at 4:15 for 15 minutes.
It's pretty cloudy today, like dark, gloomy skies, like it's going to rain and stuff. But
could be the same storm. You never know. But at least you're not having to deal with any of the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, I can't complain. I like rain. So it's so cool. I see you're wearing Bigfoot and Beyond podcast, their T-shirt.
Yep.
Shout out to those guys. I mean, we're good.
Cliff and Bobo.
I know we're friends with them, and those are good fellas.
Yeah, they started. They had the idea to start the podcast. It was something that they could do independently. They didn't have to be together. And they got the producer for the podcast portion of it is a good friend of mine, and theirs, Matt Pruitt, and they wanted me to jump in on the video side of it. They're going through format changes now where they've actually, I can't remember the company, but we can't put the podcast on YouTube anymore. I started a YouTube channel for them, but because of the way it is, we can't put the podcast on YouTube anymore, but we can do independent videos. And they were supposed to be doing one-offs that weren't going to be part of the podcast that I would then put on YouTube for them. And then of course, meet up with them at all the conferences and all the outings and everything that just got canceled this year.
Oh no.
So for anybody wondering, why is there no YouTube content anymore? It literally had the plan of meeting up with every single one they went to. CryptidCon was canceled. Cliff was at Abe Del Rio's conference in Minnesota that I couldn't make it to. And literally COVID has kind of put a damper on everything that's going on this year. So I have all this camera gear and I have all this willingness to film and edit and make great videos, and it's all been put on hold.
No. And so the reason you're saying they can't put it on YouTube is that because they're sponsored now?
Yeah, it's kind of they were doing it independently through Podbean and the Anchor app and all that, and it kind of a pay service. So I'm trying to remember the company it is, iHeart Media, basically.
Okay.
Has got them on their format now. And because of that, everything that we had put on YouTube can stay there. And the archives are still there. But everything they do from that point on with iHeartMedia,
they can't put
on YouTube, basically.
Because they don't own the rights to it anymore.
Right, yeah. But the plus side for them is that it's now a money-making, revenue-generating. Before that, YouTube was about the only thing really making money off of it. Everything, you have to wait on advertisers to pick you And then, unless, of course, somebody comes in and says, hey, if you plug my stuff, we'll pay you, blah, blah, blah. But for things like Podbean, the advertisers have to actually pick you, and then you have an advertised podcast.
Yeah.
And it just never happened. I mean, it was available to happen. And even though the viewership, the listenership of the podcast was tremendous, if you looked at the amount of downloads, nobody was really jumping on board with it. So
to want to sponsor them and stuff like that.
Yeah. So it was a very easy decision for them to make, to go with the iHeartMedia app. And I wish I could remember the name of it. I should have prepared, Tate.
Dude, hey, if it makes you feel better, neither did I.
Great. This is going to be an awesome podcast.
I think the best ones are the podcasts when you don't prepare.
Right. Completely off the cuff. I kind of wish I had more wine now. We could really make it interesting.
I mean, I can just edit out, go get some more wine.
I'm only on my first glass, so.
I was like, okay, I don't want to. Okay, well, 2 of these, and then a Newcastle, and then 1 of these. But that's over a span of time. It's not like in 1 hour.
Okay, yeah, boy, you're an alcoholic.
If it was 1 hour, I would not be able to talk. I mean, I have trouble talking already, but it would be terrible. It would be bad. But I want to ask you, since you're on here and I haven't seen you in a while, let's talk about the time when we were all at the film site together for the 50th anniversary of the Patterson Gimlin film.
Oh, what a great day that was. I wish I had taken my drone out. The weather that day when we arrived was so gloomy that I kind of shied away from taking my drone down to the site, because I didn't know how far it was. Everybody had built me up about how treacherous the hike was, and you need to be careful. It's very dangerous. And if I had known from where the parking area was to where the actual film site was, because the drone that I had at the time, it's a 25-pound backpack, basically. Oh. And I was thinking, okay, this is going to kill me if I take this thing in, and I also have to hike it back out. Turned out it wasn't really that treacherous. To someone who's not used to hiking, it could be treacherous. I can see how that would be.
Yes.
Really wish I had taken my drone in. I took the rest of the camera equipment in, and it rained, of course, but the shots that we could have gotten down there of the creek and the elevation and everything, because Kip Moore had his DJI Spark down there, and I was so jealous. To be able to fly the drone through Patty's Path, basically, would have been fantastic. So it was such a great trip. It was the first time since we got married that I had been to the West Coast. My wife and I got married in 2000 in Tahoe, so we were kind of California-Nevada border for that. Had I been a Squatcher at that time, our honeymoon would have been very different. Just seeing the reports that come from the Sierras and the area that we were in, they're just, it's covered. But we went to Willow Creek at first and stayed at the Bigfoot Motel. Highly recommend it. 4 stars if you like cold showers and smelly rooms.
I've been there before. I like it.
I loved it. Well, and I was very jealous. One of Mark DeWorth's friends, Minion Dave, he paid the exact same amount for the rooms that we had, but for some reason he got scheduled in the suite, which had a hot tub and cathedral ceilings and a king-size bed, and it cost him no more for that room than it did the rest of us. I had a shower. I've literally been in closets that had more space than this shower, and the water never got hot. So the company was great. I had never been to that area of California before. And one day, one of the bucket list things that I had, and it was when we first kind of officially met Bobo, Jonathan Wilk took us out, and Bobo just tagged along, and every corner we went around out there in the area had a story. So every time we turned around a corner, Bobo had a story. Yeah, me and so-and-so, we had some Squatches come up to us here. And then over here, we got into a bar fight and this guy got stabbed. Just every corner. It was such a great trip. I want to go back again. But then again, I had plans on going to Portland this year to do some video with Cliff and get the museum that he's got open and do some squatching and going around in the area, Portland, Bend, and Boring, and maybe dip down into California again, maybe to see the film site again without the crowds of people, and call up Rowdy and Kip and see if they wanted to meet down there and everything. But it hasn't happened this year. I really want to get back.
Oh man, I was just up there in July. So that trip, man, this July trip, I haven't told anybody on the podcast yet, but so I took my cousin with me, and then I had a coronavirus scare, and I thought my aunt had it, and I was like, oh no, my cousin was with his mom, my aunt, and now I have my cousin, and I'm gonna get it. And I was outside of Denver when I heard about it, but I didn't hear until like later the next day when I was by Vegas that luckily she didn't have it. So that was a relief. We get up there, I get a flat tire, and then I drive out to Eureka. I get a spare, but the spare was like, the tread was too thick because it was like an all-terrain tire, and like the other 3 tires were not. So I had to find a place in Eureka that had a set of 4 tires the same size that I needed with the same tread, and luckily I found a place that had it. And so I ended up spending like $800, and that was for my money, like ate into my trip money to go to Portland and everything to see
Right.
Cliff. But 3 people in our group, including me, so 2 other people, got flat tires that trip.
On the same road or in the same?
On the same dirt road, yeah. Going out to Louse Camp by the film site.
That sounds like somebody was trying to rip you off, get you a flat tire and get you pulled over.
I think, dude, I don't know what was going on, but it was.
Or that little gas station right there before you turn on the way up to Louse Camp is just looking for business, so they're throwing nails all over the road, I guess.
Dude, probably. Or they're going up there like pulling sharp
the
rocks.
One gas station in, like 30 miles.
And I don't even know if I could feel comfortable calling it a gas station, more like a.
No, we stopped there, and that's when, because at the time, I think Cliff had invited me to go up there with him the day before the 50th, because he had to speak on the 50th. So, of course, I'm like, sure, I'm Cliff Bergman's going to take me to the Patterson Gimlin film site on the 50th anniversary. Yeah, I'm going to say no to that. And we stopped there we stopped there. I don't know if he filled up with gas or not, but we stopped there and talked with the owner for a minute. And I was carrying a decorative knife on my side. And that's when he's like, yeah, you don't want to show these people what you have. Just kind of, leave that in the car. Don't let them know you have anything. That way they won't be tempted to rob you of the thing they want.
Oh, wow. And that, it's just like, is that area or the whole area?
That area, yeah, because it's such a unique mix of reservation land and poverty-stricken people in Northern California. And it's just, they talk about it being dangerous. I never really felt unsafe in that area, though. Not once. And I've been in several cities where I've been in, like, I shouldn't be in this neighborhood right now. And I never felt that way up there. So.
No. Okay, so it's funny you say that. Since I used to live in Des Moines, I'm from Missouri, originally Kansas City. I don't like Kansas City. Every time I drove through Kansas City, I felt there's this feeling I get of I'm not welcomed.
Right.
Ever. I don't know. There's just a vibe I get. But when I go up there, I don't ever feel that way. Like you're saying.
It's so late. To me, it was so laid back. I never really felt unsafe. I didn't feel like there were eyes upon you all the time. Whereas if you go to a different city, because even though I was born in Augusta, I've lived in Atlanta, I lived in Chattanooga, I lived in Tampa, Florida. And the most dangerous place that I would have said would be Tampa, Florida. There's some neighborhoods you can drive through where you feel the eyes peering on you.
Yep.
There are some neighborhoods here, like if you drive out into the country and you drive out somewhere, they want to know who you are because they don't recognize your vehicle. So you feel the eyes peering on you. And up here, of course, they're all armed and it's probably pointing at you while you're driving by anyway. But out there, I never really felt that. Even when we were stopping in places, there literally was a bar that Bobo said, like, they were there one night for finding Bigfoot, and a guy got stabbed in a bar fight in the middle of the night. And even still, I think we stopped to talk with a shop owner right next to it, and I never felt like I was in a dangerous area at all.
No, I felt completely safe there, honestly. I mean, everybody there is, I mean, I don't think it's true. I'm just blowing it out of proportion. Everybody's high. And so how can you feel threatened by high people?
Just about. And I was literally stunned because we flew out of Atlanta to San Francisco, and then it was my wife and I, Craig Woolheater, and Gene Romo. We all rented a car together. So we were just going to all carpool together and make the rental car really cheap for that week. And I ended up getting to drive over the Golden Gate Bridge and drive up to, we stopped at an In-N-Out and had an In-N-Out burger and drove all the way up to Willow Creek. And where was I going with this? What was the question? Holy cow.
I don't know.
Hang on.
You need more think juice.
This is what I need, some more thinking juice. I think I just wanted to throw Craig's name in there. More name dropping. But we drove up. Oh, I know where I was going with it. So from the San Francisco airport all the way to Willow Creek, the entire state of California reeked of weed. It was drying season. So we were told, because the kids we met in Willow Creek, they were all transient kids, nomadic kids. They had just got done. We talked with a few of them on the street. They just got done picking cherries in British Columbia and hitchhiked their way down to Willow Creek, and they hold up their signs with the scissors on it that they'd be willing to cut for money. So they cut marijuana, and they get paid, and they pocket a little bit of the buds, and everybody's high. It was the first time I'd ever driven or seen a California road. So we're on the interstate, and motorcycles weave in and out of traffic. They don't have to maintain their lane. They can literally weave wherever they want to go. Totally foreign to me when I got there. But genuinely, I knew I was in California when we got passed by a VW bus, and it was billowing smoke. And from the inside, not from the engine. It was just billowing smoke from hotboxing. And I was like, because I get drug tested at work, and I was genuinely concerned about inhaling this much smell.
You thought you were going to be like so high on secondhand smoke.
Literally, the whole state reeked of marijuana. I was just overwhelmed, and I never got used to it. You know how you be around a bad smell and you might get used to it. Everywhere you went, it smelled like that. Willow Creek smelled like that. The only time it didn't smell like that is when we got out to the film site.
It's because it's so
far away from everything.
Yeah, that's so funny.
It was the only place that didn't reek of weed. But if you were near a main road, there were drying houses everywhere. And I actually had a drone shot in Willow Creek where I came up right around where the Bigfoot Lounge was, basically at the top of the hill. And I flew up this great vista. But once I got over the hill, you could see all these drying houses. So I've always had to cut that out of my shot because there's this metropolis of marijuana that's drying out, ready to be shipped everywhere.
That's so funny, though. I think there's like pretty much weed wherever you go up there. You could probably just pick it off the trees or wherever. Now
that it's legal, I mean, anybody that picks out seeds and throws it, and they just drift in the wind like tumbleweeds. Of course, it's going to grow. They say like North Korea, it grows wild because it's not illegal there, but it's not. For some reason, people that have been in North Korea, they're just surprised that they're driving down the road and there's weeds on the side of the road, like we see daffodils and dandelions, and it's marijuana growing with giant buds. And I'm surprised it's not doing that in California.
I think soon that's going to happen. It's going to happen for sure. There's going to be a time when it's going to be so legal there. It's just you're going to have weed with like your spinach or your salads. They're going to be like, you want some weed on that?
Your hamburger bun, instead of sesame seeds, it's going to be weed seeds.
Instead of lettuce and tomato, it's going to be weed and tomato. I can totally see it.
With that many people and the legality of it, I mean, weed does not incite violence in people. And I can't understand how anybody can think it's a violent place. To that point, we all went out one night to this dive bar in Arcata. And we ended up taking over the bar. Jonathan Wilk had an app where he could take over the jukebox and play any song he wanted to. So he started playing polka music.
Oh
We
my
drove
God.
out the locals, and the people that stayed, the diehards that stayed, we started buying them drinks, started playing pool with them. Never once did we feel like we were going to end up getting into a fight or getting shot for taking over this bar. The bartender was loving it. He was raking in cash. And
That's
we literally took
amazing.
this whole place over and walked there and walked back, and never once felt like we were in danger at all. So I call shenanigans on people saying that part of the world is unsafe.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anywhere else. If you're in a wrong place at the wrong time, that's bad. But like you're saying, I never felt, uneasy there,
No,
even
you
alone.
get that feeling when you're in a bad area. You get that feeling that says, hey, this might not be unsafe. You might want to pull yourself back, or you might want to not say the wrong thing. I never felt that way up there.
Well, it's kind of like squatching, or like in the wilderness. If you feel like there's a predator around, you kind of get a sense.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like that same feeling. You just got to know how to read your feelings. What's that thing that Les Strauss said? Feelings aren't facts, but they're indicators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely true.
It's so true. So when you were up at the film site for the 50th anniversary, we were all there. You were filming everything going on, and that was like, I saw the video you made. That was super cool. But Daniel Perez and I, we had a copy or a replica or a track, whatever, made by Cliff Barrickman. Well, he made a copy of the original.
Yeah.
And we impressed it in the soil at the film site, and you got that on film. What do you think of that?
Actual substrate. That was amazing. I almost kind of wish we had done a little bit more with that, or made a little bit more fanfare out of it. If we could find, because I think it was like track 16, the famous Patty track, because it was so perfect and everything, which Cliff actually hates it because it's too perfect. He likes the imperfect one because it shows movement and it shows how the foot works and everything. And this was just a flat footprint that everybody knows from the film site. If we could have found like a general location of where it was.
Oh, where that was. Oh.
And superimpose it on, like Bob Titmus, standing by it, when they actually cast it 50 years prior to that, would have been so great.
We'll have to just do that like the next October. I think this one's too soon, but if we could do that, if we can get that copy from Cliff,
yeah,
and go out there and do that next October, find that kind of relative area, that'd be super cool to do. But it'd be cool to do that and then cast our impression that we used with the cast.
Right, and see what comes out of it. Yeah.
That'd be super cool. Make a cast of
it. I don't know that anybody's ever done a cast of a cast.
Like, no, I don't think so. I mean,
but making an impression with the actual footprint cast and then casting that
would be so cool.
Because we were all stuffing rocks in our pockets. Everybody that thought about having a vendor table at any conference anywhere was like, yeah, I'm definitely selling Bluff Creek rocks from the creek.
Well, I think I have like a couple bottles. I have some sand here.
Sand?
Yeah, I got some sand here. I'm actually going to be doing a giveaway on the Bluff Creek Instagram, or the podcast Instagram, and giving away just some sand from the film site. Because I got so much of it, it's like...
Yeah, the only worry I had with that, I was trying to pick out, perfectly good flat but smaller rocks, because I had a few friends I was going to give them to and keep some for myself. And Cliff was stuffing his pockets thinking about, because he was about to open up the museum. So he's like, yeah, I got to have rocks to sell and everything, and show off. And the only thing I was worried about was going overweight back home, because my bag was, like 47 pounds and it has to be 50 or under. And we had one carry-on, and luckily, I stuffed my pockets with other stuff to get on the plane to make my luggage light enough to get back home.
That's hilarious. So, I mean, you and I can see this because when I edit this later, this is only going to be audio. But I found, or I think it was my friend or I who found this rock in the Bluff Creek area, and it looks like a Bigfoot footprint.
It does look like a Bigfoot footprint. That's amazing.
So I keep that up there with all my Bigfoot display stuff up here. You can probably see it in the background.
It's a petrified baby footprint cast.
It's a premature baby footprint cast. If premature was premature for Bigfoots, I don't know. Double premature.
I loved going out to the Bluff Creek area. I loved being able to be on site where, that was the start of so many people's fascination with Bigfoot. I know a lot of people above my generation, their start was kind of The Legend of Boggy Creek, seeing the film and then becoming interested in it. But for me, it was genuinely the Patterson Gimlin film, because even though I was born after and actually born the same year that Roger Patterson passed away, I grew up on In Search Of, basically. And that was the film that every Bigfoot show you ever saw as a kid that I was always interested in, that was the film that you saw. To be on site there and to be where it actually took place, to know that it has never really fully been disproven. I've talked with Bob Gimlin. I've looked in his eyes. I'm very good with knowing when somebody is being truthful with me, when somebody's being deceptive, and there is no lie in his eye. I do understand that he's told the story so many times, but you can throw him curveballs and he hits every last one of them out of the park every single time. So, with anybody else's story, like if we're doing an investigation here, you just kind of throw them a curveball or come in the side door. And if they're unprepared or don't know how to answer it, the truth doesn't have to think about it. You ask me a question, if it's the truth, it's automatic. And it's automatic with Bob. Everything you ask him, right? So to be right there where it actually happened and to know that's a verified and one of the best films, it just bothers me so much we haven't been able to duplicate or get more film footage with all the technology that we have.
I know.
That's the best that we have, but it's so good. And I can't understand how people say, oh, that's clearly a man in a suit, when two broke cowboys could never have thought or designed a suit that was so far superior to anything that was in Hollywood at that time.
Or that could still be done.
Can still be done. It still can't be replicated where it doesn't look like a man in a suit. And this is actually a man in a woman's suit, basically.
Yeah.
They didn't have silicone to make pendulous breasts. They didn't have animatronics and CGI to make muscles move. They didn't have any of this stuff. You look at Stanley Kubrick, 1969, he made 2001: A Space Odyssey. The Dawn of Man, they are clearly men in monkey suits. It's really good special effects, practical special effects, but it is clearly men in monkey suits. And he had a blank paycheck. He had a blank checkbook to make this movie. He made space look like space. People really thought he went to space to shoot this movie, and yet it was all practical special effects, but still his apes looked like men in monkey suits.
But it's funny you say Stanley Kubrick, because I've been researching a bunch of things on The Shining because there's so much stuff about that. Stanley Kubrick, he is the most detailed, anal director about every single thing in a film.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to make sure everything looks real, and he just does everything. He's on a different wavelength than a lot of people.
There's the whole thing of 50 takes with him. There was a minimum of 50 takes for every shot, and he was satisfied with what he saw with the Dawn of Man, with the men in the monkey suits. It was amazing how he got the mouths to move, and you didn't see parts. The only thing that kind of gave it away was the eyes, and yet you watch it, and it's still men in suits. And to sit there and think that two cowboys could have constructed something that complex when Planet of the Apes, same year, it's absolutely muffled people talking like this through their mouths, and you not even overdubbing themselves, talking through a rubber mask, and those won Academy Awards for special effects. Still don't look as real as what Patty does in the Patterson Gimlin.
Well, even Planet of the Apes, it was mainly just the face and hands, really, because everything else.
And they wore clothes over top of it, so they didn't have to do anything else with the bodysuit or anything.
And there's only one movie in that whole series that Jeff Meldrum talks about. There's a sauna scene when all the apes are in the sauna, they don't have clothes on, and you can still tell they're people in costumes.
It's people in costumes and loose fitting almost, not form fitting. They just didn't have the technology back then. And to suggest that two cowboys who know everything about horses can then sew and stitch a million hairs onto, a suit, and then to have it be anatomically correct. Not only that, but a man couldn't fit in the suit and walk in the manner that she walked, basically. Meldrum proved that time and time again. A man could not fit in a suit of that size. If you match the footprint casts that go with the film and you work it all out, she was around 7 foot tall. Even if you're walking on stilts, it's going to show. Yeah. Everyone has tried to fake it since then. You can tell that it's a man in a monkey suit. This one you cannot.
Yeah, and you've been to the film site, obviously. So even with it, how flat it is out there, to walk on that surface in a costume, I think would be pretty difficult with branches you probably might not see as you're looking in a mask. You might trip and stumble, but in the film, Patty, the Bigfoot, walks fluidly in that. Like, that'd be super hard to do in a costume.
Yeah, and to have, to say that they faked it and to have scheduled it to happen at that location where a flood had happened that same year, it would have been treacherous ground. They would have certainly found safer ground to walk on or clearer ground to walk on to get a better shot. You just kind of see a lot of the hoax videos that come out. You see the convenience of their shot. You can always tell they're a hoax when all of a sudden it's awful convenient. You had your camera going at that time to get this. And as soon as it's almost clear, you shake and run and everything. It's almost like a formula nowadays where they're shook before he started because he was trying to get a better shot. And then, especially with a stabilized image, and then he's taping it until he can't follow it anymore. And then, to hear the story about what happened afterwards, about how, they could tell she was up watching down and they just couldn't get around because the creek was raging at the time. So she was on one side of the creek, they were on the other. And I've seen the creek, to imagine that it was not as wide then as it is now and have the same amount of water going through. I'm not taking a horse through that, and I'm certainly not walking through that. So,
well, not only that too, but there's always this thing of people are like, well, couldn't she hear them and stuff like that or smell them? They were downwind. She was upwind, right?
She was upwind.
Yeah, she was upwind.
They were downwind of her, basically. So she couldn't tell them or hear them coming. And
it was all sand.
Even now, you can stand on one side of Bluff Creek. Someone could stand on the other, and you cannot yell and talk to them back and forth. The creek is just going to muffle any sound that's going through. And that's now. That's even when it's a lot more flattened out.
Yeah, exactly.
When the flood it was actually really going. And because I do North Georgia here quite a bit, and there's water is very similar to what Bluff Creek would have been like here. And you're not communicating with somebody on the other side of the creek, especially that they were, especially at that distance. You're not going to be able to hear anything that's coming. So the only reason she knew they were coming was, she got the heebie-jeebies like we get and sensed that there was something wrong and looked up and saw them and walked away. But the compelling. The walking away part was so compelling because I had my sighting in 2012 and it walked away from me. Did not run. It just meandered away just like she did. As if this is my area. I'm just going to walk to where I know it's safe and I know you can't follow.
Yeah. And like the other thing, when you say you can't hear, I don't know, like I've probably heard it from like Steven Strait for the Bigfoot books and some other people. At the time when they were riding on horseback, they're also on sand, which is kind of already like quiet, especially on horses. Yeah. And she's I think she was drinking out of the river or the creek. So she's down by the creek, she's upwind of them, and they're on horses on sand, and she gets startled. That's when and I think that's why the horses got startled, because they're seeing something that's like not natural to them.
Right. When she stood up, and the horses knew immediately that there was something amiss. That's when they both got kind of thrown off. And the
And that's
sand,
why Roger was shaking the camera.
that's why he was shaking. He was getting it going, but he was trying to get a stable position to get a good shot. So that's why you have so much of the shaking going on at the beginning of the original film. But you talk about that sand too. It's a shame you can't see it, but that sand you had in the bottles, I describe it to people when they're asking me about it. It's like if you went to go buy a bag of concrete and you didn't mix it with the rocks or the water yet. It's almost the same consistency, a little bit grainier than what a fine silty concrete mix would be, but it's almost the same color, density, style. When it's on the ground, it's hard as a rock, but when you pick it up and you put it in a jar, it's like this light, airy stuff that you could breathe in almost.
I actually like put it through like one of those fine mesh and kind of just filtered out all the big rocks, and so it's just a nice sand powder.
Yeah, it's powder. So a horse walking on that makes zero sound.
No, even a human walking on that would make zero sound.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that startled me about the area itself. Once you kind of removed yourself away from the creek, how quiet it was out there. There's so many evergreen trees out there and so much foliage out there. But even when you're in this valley where Bluff Creek is, you have a mountain on either. Well, I don't know if you call them mountains or hills out there, but literally you're in this valley basically where the creek is, and it's so little sound. The only thing you could hear was other people talking out there. There was no residual sound coming from anywhere. So it was very creepy as to how quiet it was in that area.
Yeah, it kind of like freaks you out.
Yeah.
Freaks me out a lot, man, being out there and it's so quiet. It's like, I don't like.
Yeah, especially because y'all have the game cams out there, so you know what wildlife is walking by the same area you're walking by. So I mean,
there's bears or mountain lions.
Bears and puma and everything walking by. And so that's absolutely amazing. I really loved the area. I wish I could go back. And Cliff always recommended, to go up maybe June, July, because he says, if you think about a vacation in the southeastern United States in June, July, you better pack more water than you do clothes because it's so hot, so uncomfortable. And he's like, no, it's not like that out here. It's actually the best time of year to come out here. The weathers are very mild. It's not going to rain. The nights are really cool.
It's true.
And that's just amazing to me because, we do everything here in the fall and in the wintertime if it's a mild winter and in the early spring before anything kind of wakes up. And out there, it's like you go in the middle of July and it's like perfect temps. I've seen pictures of Cliff even out at his museum in July and August, and he's wearing a sweater.
No, it's funny. When I went up there this past July, it was, for some reason, it was colder than usual. And I was like, dude, it's really cold. Like, I need a jacket. And during the day, like if you're in the sun, it's hot, obviously,
Yeah.
But if you're in the shadows, kind of underneath the foliage of the trees, it's not too bad. It's perfect weather, and it's nice. Yeah, you don't need a lot of water. And at Louse Camp, there's a creek you can jump in and swim in, and it's like that'll cool you right down.
Yeah, I think Bobo was talking about that not too long ago. They had actually gone, and he jumped in. He said, even though it was summertime, the water was so cold he had to jump right back out.
Oh, it's freezing cold, dude. I'm pretty sure you could get hypothermia in that if you stayed in long enough.
You stayed in it too long, yeah. So I don't know that it ever gets really hot enough for me to jump in.
Yeah, I don't think it's probably the same even in wintertime. Maybe a little bit colder. Who knows? So I was gonna
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna ask you. I'm pretty sure we know the answer, but what is your opinion on Patty? Do you think she could be real, or do you think she could be fake?
She's absolutely real. Absolutely real. In my opinion, it's my opinion because I've studied the film enough. I've seen enough of the shows. I've heard enough of the expert opinions, and not just from the shows, but I've had conversations with Meldrum about the film. I've had conversations with John Mayanzinski about the film. I've had conversations with a lot of people. The only naysayers really in the Bigfoot world that have any problem with the film are with the timeline of the film processing after it was taken. Basically, no one that I know of in the Bigfoot world looks at it and says, okay, here's how I know this is a man in a suit. They're always arguing the semantics of the film processing timeline afterwards, which I have literally nothing to do with. I'm focused purely on the film itself and knowing what I know about Hollywood special effects. I'm a movie buff. I have a broadcasting degree. I went to college for film. Knowing what I know about the way it's done, there's no way that suit could have been faked.
There's no way. And I don't get why so many people are hung up on like after the fact, like, oh, it was shipped off to his brother at this time or that time, and they took this road or that road to get there. I'm like, that's besides the point, really, because they're
trying to discredit the film by discrediting the timeline, saying that it wasn't shot when they say it was shot, or it wasn't processed when they say it was processed. And to me, that's
I call baloney on that.
Yeah, it's missing the point of the whole thing. You're literally missing the point. Watch the film, study the film, and talk to Bob about what exactly happened if you have any questions about that. To go out there and see the log jam from the film still in existence, sitting there rotting in place basically 50 years later.
Yeah.
And to know that I'm looking at this knowing what it could have been 50 years prior when the flood washed all the trees down and they jammed up in this one area, knowing that Patty's walking on the other side of it, and to sit there and in your mind figure out how big she must have been. There's no way. Bob's a very tiny man, and we haven't really gotten this tall as a nation until recently. If you look back in the past and you look at like Hollywood stars and things like that, they're very small people. So to say that this small guy got into this suit of a 7-foot giant and walked as clearly and as fluidly as she did without giving away any type of, okay, this is obviously a man in a suit because he stumbled or he walked or he made a human type movement.
Yeah.
This was an animal that was walking bipedally away from them very fluidly and with purpose. And that cannot be duplicated and has yet to be duplicated.
I mean, people try and replicate the walk, but that's one thing to replicate the walk, not in a costume. It's another thing to do it in a costume.
Right. And the costumes of that time, because, I grew up in the 70s with Halloween costumes that you were legally blind when you wore them. So to suggest that they made a costume that that person could have perfect peripheral vision in and could motivate themselves and turn their entire body to look at Bob, who was pointing the gun at her at the time, and not miss a step and still walk just as fluidly. Wow, what happened? I just saw.
Sorry. It's my dad's. So I record on my dad's Zoom account.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
You're saying she not to miss a step when she's
but
walking.
to literally turn, because the way Meldrum was talking about it, the way the neck muscles were formed, she can't turn her head the way we can turn our head from side to side.
You have to turn your whole body,
her shoulders to look and never miss a step while doing that. Try and do that on your own without knowing the substrate that you're walking on. Try and do that, and then imagine doing it in a suit with floppy feet.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And another thing, Ian Carton and I were talking when we were up at Bluff Creek this past July. So not to mention that you have to turn your kind of whole upper body to look. But she's also walking, like as a human, when you walk, you like straighten your leg out when you put your foot out forward to take a step.
Yeah.
She's walking with like almost a 90-degree bend in her, like at her knee. Like her back foot is almost like her toes are pointed at the ground level.
Yeah.
If you get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, literally. And that's not the way people walk. And that's not the way that somebody that would try and hoax a video would even think to walk.
No, and she's kind of pigeon-toed, to be honest, too, I think.
Yeah, because of the way that it was explained, they have movement in their toes the same way we have in our fingers. Basically, we've been, mankind, we've been shod for about 200 years now. And you think about it, if you've ever broken a limb and you put your arm in a cast. Let's say you broke your arm, you put it in a cast. 6 weeks later, when it's healed and you get the cast off, is that arm the exact same strength and size as your other arm? No. So imagine doing that with shoes for 20 or so years. Well, they've never had shoes. They've never walked in shoes. So their feet have that type of dexterity to motivate themselves. Not so much as like a chimpanzee where they can grab onto limbs, but their feet, sort of shaped like ours, still have an amazing amount of dexterity that we don't have in our toes. Basically, I'm not one that can. I've known people that can curl their toes up basically like a cat paw sometimes, and I can't do that. But
I'm
even
trying
still,
right now, and I can't.
They can't splay their feet. They can't. If you see some of the tracks that even Patty left, there's a pinky toe splayed out as she's moving around, based on what she's walking on. The foot responds to it. Two cowboys in 1967 would not have thought about that.
No, there's so many little small details, like you're saying. The breasts that you see in the film, if you look at an HD clear photo of Patty up, that 352, you'll see that clearly. They're not going to think of that. They're not going to think of like the foot, the way it works with the ground, the stride, how she walks, the gait, and everything. There's so many small, intricate details that I think would be so much to put in to hoax something like that.
Right. They knew horses. They knew the terrain. They knew the outdoors. They knew domesticated animals very well. These were both two intelligent men. But to say that they were wildlife primatologists or wildlife biologists to know that extreme amount of anatomy and then create a suit around it with 1960s technology, it's not feasible. I will throw that in everybody's face every single time. If you look at the technology that was available to them at the time, and it was not available. No one would have thought to have made a female Sasquatch ever.
No, and not to mention that the fact that to fake tracks like that, you got Jerry Crew tracks that came out in '58. Then you got Roger Patterson, I think, he had a track at Laird Meadow before '67. Then the tracks from the film site, you can't fake all that. And they're all different, those tracks that they were taking. And a lot of people have probably seen those tracks before. And even tracks up to now, the way they interact with the ground, you can't fake that. I don't see Roger or Bob faking something like that either.
Because everybody imagines that the tracks that were left were all stampers, basically. They were all the perfect, pristine footprint cast that you and Daniel Perez made, that made at the film site itself. They weren't that way. There were some that were just really ugly tracks, which like to Cliff's point, he loves to death because it shows the movement that was going on. It shows the disturbance of the ground that the foot made. So it tells you a lot more about how the foot works than it would if you just had a giant row of stampers, basically, with the exact same footprint over and over and over again. Even when I see deer tracks here, we've got a lake house here recently, and we'll be walking down to the lake, and there'll be deer tracks going across our path. They're not the same. Not every footprint is the same in whatever the mud or substrate or sand, wherever it happened. So if it was faked and the footprints were faked, it's absolutely going to be stampers. It's going to be somebody. And I've been on that soil. I didn't leave a footprint on that soil. I tried.
Neither did I.
I took a giant leap and I cleared a space and tried to leave a boot print in that soil. It didn't happen. That stuff is concrete when it's done. And I know it was a lot looser back then because it had been churned up by the flood.
But even still,
even down by the creek, I could not leave a footprint with that stuff. Even when you did, it would fall in on itself almost immediately. So the weight of whatever this was in the film, which I believe was real, had to have been 3 to 4 times my own weight in order to leave an impression like that.
It had to be like what? Okay, here's the track.
Right, and so you're talking about maybe a 1-inch impression I couldn't even
Yeah.
scratch the surface of the substrate in
The,
California.
just the toes right there. Nobody can see this, but Jeffrey and I are looking at a track that I have. The depth of the toes, that's at least an inch. Easy.
At least probably an inch and a half of the big toe going in, which meant that that big toe was used to launch her off into the next step. So as the heel's coming down, because as humans, we heel strike a lot, but they walk on their forefront, then the heel comes down, but then it's also used to propel her into the next step, basically, to move forward. So the big toe and the toes themselves are going to have a deeper impression than the rest of the foot, because that's what's being used to literally propel her into the next step. I couldn't scratch the surface of the substrate with a boot, and I was trying like hell to get this to leave some type of impression, just to kind of tell myself, okay, if this was fake, if this was a man doing this, then how did they do it? They didn't go out there and dig artistically these footprints, each and every one. And
that would be.
It rained that night, so they had to cover up. They had to go back and cover up some of the prints that they wanted to cast and keep. So, at any time, the footprints that they left could have completely disappeared before they got back, basically. So
Yeah.
no, they didn't go out and fake these footprints. They didn't go out and fake this film. It's a legitimate film. It's been verified that the film itself has not been altered, and I don't know why people have such a big deal with it. It's not a man in a suit.
People, you know what? I think it's just people just not willing to do homework, honestly.
Right.
It's just there's you got leaders and you got followers. And then the followers are going to be like, oh, it's fake. Then you got leaders who are the people who are actually putting the time and effort into it and learning for themselves whether it's fake or not,
Yeah, so my most recent upload on YouTube, plugging my YouTube channel, basically, I redid a lot of the shots from the 50th. So I had the 50th originally when it happened, and I redid a lot of it. And it's one of my most viewed videos right now because I titled it correctly and I had the right thumbnail to go with it and everything. So anybody interested in Bigfoot, even, a cursory interest in Bigfoot, they're going to come across this video and watch it. And the comments that I get are, okay, so where's the proof? And I don't engage with all of them, but my first thought is, okay, so where's your research? You
right?
don't sit there. I can't sit there and explain to you in a YouTube comment, okay, here's all the proof. I'm not doing the homework for you. Look into it yourself, basically. Once you do, and it's just like I did, once you start looking into it, you start to make connections on things that aren't necessarily available. So you'll see somebody has a sighting and it has a similarity to another sighting that's nowhere near the area, but it's not something that normal people think of. If a normal person's going out to fake Bigfoot, they always want to make it scary. It's always coming out and jumping at you and going, blur, where 99.999% of the sightings aren't that way at all. They happen to see something and it wasn't scary at all. It may have had a scary effect on them because their entire world crumbled down because they woke up that morning knowing Bigfoot didn't exist, and then suddenly there's a 9-foot monster standing in front of them.
Exactly.
But the event itself is rarely scary. It's rarely an event where they're being intimidated or harassed. There are those encounters out there that happen, but it's rarely that way. So I don't know where I was going with that either. So.
It sounded really good to me, and it made a lot of sense. That's all I can say. You're talking about the comment people on YouTube doing their homework.
Yeah, I'm not doing the homework for you. Basically, if you're not willing to look into it, I don't engage on those comments. But even with the Bigfoot and Beyond page, we would get comments every now and then, and sometimes Cliff and Boba would jump in, sometimes I would jump in, sometimes Pruitt would jump in, and it just gets to be, after the 1,000th time you've seen the comment of where's the proof, it's like, okay,
I'm done with this.
Yeah, I'm done with this. Where's your homework? Look into it for yourself, but I'm not here to teach you, basically.
Seriously, man. The information's out there. Just go look for it.
The information is readily available with all the stuff going on now politically, and I don't want to get on a political rant, but people are so willing to believe some really outrageous things right now, and yet Bigfoot's supposedly a joke.
I think Bigfoot makes more logical sense than anything else people are believing.
I think I posted that one day. It's like people in some of these facets will believe these unbelievable things that it almost makes Bigfoot people look normal by comparison.
I love that. That's the best thing I've ever heard. To be quite honest.
At least we're camping and hiking and getting to see beautiful nature. What are you doing? Arguing with trolls online.
Oh my God, that's so funny. So Jeff, I definitely want to ask you about your sighting that you had.
Okay.
You told me before when we were at the film site a long time ago, but refresh my memory and then tell people listening what happened.
Okay. So basically, back in 2012, this was February 18th of 2012, the guy that I would do my research here with, it was just him and I. We're in the South basically, and Southern men, it's hard to get them to admit they like Bigfoot. There's a lot of Bigfoot enthusiasts here. They're just very in the closet about it. We were both, very open about it, and we wanted to add some more people to our group. And he knew of a guy that I'm still very good friends with, and then my cousin wanted to kind of come out with us one day. And we had access to private land just south of where we are in Augusta, probably about an hour south, but it's directly on the Savannah River. And what was so unique about this property, we had been down there before, it's about 100 acres of land that's surrounded by 13,000 acres of old plantation land owned by a rich, the guy who owns a newspaper here. And he does some logging there, but he just basically owns the land to have land. They're not making any more of it anymore. He's kind of the Lex Luthor of our area. He wants to. So it's in the middle of nothing, basically. It's 100 acres, and it's surrounded by nothing but trees and forests on the Savannah River down south of us. And we had, a couple of interesting things happen out there on some camping trips a couple of times. So it just so happened, we wanted to test these two new guys out, and it wasn't really a squatching day. It was the middle of the day. We met up, we drove down there, and the best way to get to know somebody, we thought, was just take them out into the woods and see how they do. You don't want to end up on a squatching trip with somebody who can't go for a hike, for less than 200 feet, and they're not whining and complaining. So we get down there and take off, and basically the shape of the property, the way the river goes, the river's in kind of an omega shape. So the property itself is a peninsula surrounded by the river. We had never fully made it to the tip of that peninsula before, my old squatching buddy and I. And so we felt, because it was February, the leaves were down. We had gotten chased out by hogs before. I don't know if anybody listening, but we have hogs here, and they are quite rampant. And if you come on them in the woods, you have limited choices of what to do. Basically, you got to hope they run and not run towards you. So we had been chased away by hogs. There's cottonmouths and copperheads and rattlesnakes everywhere down here. But we're thinking February, it's a perfect time to go out. It was a fairly warm day for February. We actually did come across a garter snake same day. It was warm enough in February for a garter snake to be out, which I thought was completely unusual.
It's a little weird.
It was in pants and shirt sleeves. And so it's my cousin and then my squatching buddy and the guy that he brought. And so we go taking off, and it was really great. I had a portable GPS. It was a Magellan portable GPS, battery operated, but we would use it to set waypoints and to know where our track was. So that way, if we just went freestyle into the woods, we knew how to get back, basically.
Yeah.
So we go taking off towards this peninsula, just chatting, normal stuff. How did you get into it? How did you get into it? What is your interest in it? And so finally we found the river, and we were looking around. It was on a sandbar. Basically, there was a good sand bank, and there was lots of tracks. There was raccoon tracks and coyote tracks and lots of stuff in the sand. And so my old squatching buddy was like, yeah, we finally made it to the peninsula. And I pulled out my GPS, and I said, no, we didn't. My old squatching buddy was famous for having 2 left feet. Whenever he would walk in a circle, basically. We had done an expedition one day. It was just him and I in this area, and we literally walked for 3 hours. And it was a swampy area. It was after hunting season. It was just he and I. And he's like, well, I guess we've gone far enough. Nothing's happened. Pull out your GPS and see,
Oh no.
which way we need to go to get back to my vehicle. And I pulled it out and I said, oh, we just need to go about 100 yards that way. In fact, I see your truck right there. We had walked in a big, giant 3-hour circle. Famous for having 2 left feet. So true to form, we had walked to the right side of this peninsula. Now there's 2 new guys there, and that kind of insulted him a little bit. He was, trying to show his woodsmanship, basically.
Oh my God.
So he's like, okay, which way to the peninsula? Point. And I pointed straight. I said, go straight that way. And he took off. And he's the kind of guy, very obstinate. He took off, and I've been in the woods with him where if he gets in that mood, you're not going to catch him. He's walking, but you might as well run, and you're still not going to catch him. He was gone. So one guy was saying, well, it's your uncle who owns the property, so I'm going to stay with you in case the game warden shows up. And the other guy's like, well, you have the GPS, so I'm definitely staying with you so I don't get lost out here. And so we all start taking off towards the peninsula ourselves. And my old Squatching buddy, we would communicate if we ever got separated by doing wood knocks to each other, just a single wood knock. And he had a very distinctive knock because he would use a post hole digger replacement from Lowe's and Home Depot as his walking stick. And he would use that to do a wood knock, which made a very distinctive sound. So we could hear him start wood knocking when he finally realized he was separated from us. And the next wood knock that came was obvious to me. He wasn't staying in place. He was still moving. So we could hear the wood knocks moving through the woods. And so I wasn't going to chase him down or anything. I said, let's just head this way and he can find us when we find the peninsula. And so we ended up coming up to this thicket, and continually, about every 5 minutes or so, we could hear him give his one wood knock. And I didn't have a walking stick that was good enough to knock back. So we just kept on, basically. And there were these vines that were growing up to the top of the trees, and they would get so thick, they would break the top of the trees, and then everything would fall to the ground. And it made kind of this fence, basically, of vegetation. And that combined, even though it's February, they had this river cane bamboos, little bamboo shoots that were just coming up that were everywhere. So we came across this basic forested fence, basically. So I had to get down on my knees to crawl through this hole to get through it because we could see the trees clearing out. So I knew we were approaching the river. You can kind of see the light, and we were no longer in woods. And my cousin was right behind me, and he comes crawling through. And then the other guy that was with us, his name is Sandy. He's a big guy. So he was having trouble, big guy scrumbling through the brush and everything. So he was still on all fours. And when I stood up, I noticed about 30 yards in front of me, my old Squatching buddy was wearing a black shirt. He's got black hair. I said, oh, well, there he is right there. And then that's when I realized, because it was on the other side of this other thicket where some more vines had fallen down, I realized he's not that tall. And also, that wasn't a shirt it was wearing. It was hair I was looking at. And I said, that's not him. What the hell is that? So I'm looking at the back of this from about mid-back all the way up to the top. Very lean, hair covered, not fur, not like a bear's coat, hair. The same hair that was on its head was the same hair that was on its back, was the same hair that was on its side. And it was dead focused because it had its back to us. It was literally choosing the lesser of two evils because it was pointed straight towards my Squatching buddy who just did a wood knock way in the woods ahead. It was focused on where he was going. And once it heard us coming up behind, it just casually walked away from us. Now here I am like a cartoon trying to get through these river cane bamboo and these vines like a cartoon. My feet are moving. I'm not going anywhere. I'm trying to chase after this thing. It is just as calm as it can be, walking away from us, never turned to look at us. I never made eye contact. It just walked in a direction. And what happened after that? It's been so long ago since it happened. So it walks away, and we finally get into this area where it was, and it was this completely cleared area in almost like a horseshoe shape. It was this giant cleared area of, I would say, 40 to 50 yards. So you had the river, and then you had this wall of vegetation in a giant U shape with this cleared area. And it was very weird. And then the smell hit us. And my cousin, by the way, was standing right behind me, right behind my right shoulder. He saw exactly what I saw. My other buddy was still down on all fours, so he was trying to scramble up to see what we were seeing. It walked away and literally disappeared through the vegetation because it knew the way to walk without having to get through. It obviously had an exit through this. And the smell hits us. And it's just, the entire area reeks of what I always tell people is, if you've ever like gone on vacation and right before you left, you took a pee in the toilet.
Yeah.
And you forgot to flush, and then you come back from vacation. That smell, that old urine smell, it was so pungent. It's not like everybody says wet dog or skunky. It wasn't any of those things. It was just
like wet urine.
It's just like this old urine smell. It was very pungent.
Gross.
So down an area, and we could still hear my old squatching buddy wood knocking in the distance. He was actually curving left this time instead of right, so he still didn't find the peninsula. Come to find out later, it walked directly behind him, and he didn't turn around. He thought it was us approaching him, so he didn't bother to turn around and look at it. It walked directly behind him. He heard it walking behind him and around him. If he had just turned around, he'd have had a face-to-face with it.
Oh,
he thought it was us finally catching up to him. So he was just, going to poke at us once he found the river, basically, because he hadn't found the river yet.
Oh, man.
So we're in this area that's cleared out, and we find an impression near the river, almost like somebody took a giant bowling ball and just put a divot in the earth. There were no spoils or anything like that. It was just a divot in the earth, and that's where the smell was the strongest. So our theory was that that's where it was resting for the day until it heard my buddy wood knocking, and then us approaching. Of course, it got up to investigate everything, but the smell of it was strongest right in that area. The other interesting thing we found was some of the river cane bamboo. 2 stalks had been pulled together, and another stalk had been twisted around it, which we had a picture of. This stuff you can't bend with your hand if you wanted to.
It's pretty strong stuff.
And here it was bent around in a shape. Directly nearby was a perfect ball of scat. So it was a perfect golf ball size round ball of scat, which I took my knife out and cut it, and it was full of grass. So either it was mud or scat, but it was perfect golf ball size, as if it had been rolled by hand. Yeah. Way. I only mention that because I'll get to that later, basically, because we had gone back to the site almost a year and a half later. The big guy, Sandy, and I had gone back to the site a year and a half later. We all went back a while later to kind of recreate and do a Finding Bigfoot. How tall would you say it was? And we found that the area that was cleared out was completely overgrown now. So it had to have been maintained to be that clear because the vegetation just took over. We did find the spot where we had seen it from. We both independently did the how tall would you think it was, and we both agreed it was about 7'6". It was about 7.5 feet tall. Both agreed it was very lean. It wasn't the giant muscular Sasquatch we had always heard of. It was very lean, but still 7.5 feet tall. So later, when Sandy and I had gone back, we found another area in a completely different space that was U-shaped, had a wall of vegetation, had the river at its back, and found a year and a half later a perfect circular ball of scat, golf ball size. It was older, cut it open, full of grass, a little bit bug-eaten, almost a quarter mile away of where we had the sighting, basically. So our theory was that this was the safe place to hide. You could hear any boats coming up the river, so you knew to get away from the boats coming up and down the river, basically. So you had full view of the river, but you also had this wall of vegetation that anything coming through the woods just could not see through or even get through.
Or would be quiet.
or would be quiet because it's, the place was just covered with deer, lots of hogs, lots of wildlife everywhere, foxes, coyotes, you name it. Coyotes would howl all night long. So the same day of the sighting, my old squatching buddy finally caught up to us and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And at that point, we never really said we just saw a Sasquatch. We just saw a Bigfoot. Those words never came out of our mouths. We just, did you see that? Did you hear that? Did you know what's going on? So at this time, we're standing in the area where the river cane bamboo was twisted. We can hear it walking and pacing in the distance. My old squatching buddy and I was like, do you hear that? And he's like, yeah, there's something out there moving, watching us. We did not go after it. Can't tell you why. Don't know why. Not something within it. It wasn't that we were scared or anything. It's just that we were staying put. Now, here we are. We're two experienced Sasquatch researchers and two rookies. We should have been scouring this area for hair samples and footprint samples and going back to where the divot was, because my squatching buddy, we had found divots like that in other areas where we're walking in the woods and suddenly it's surprisingly clear. And there's just this, it's like somebody takes this giant bowling ball and makes a divot in the ground, but there's no spoils anywhere. So we don't know how it was made. I found one in North Georgia as well, a divot made in the ground with not like you pick up the dirt and you throw it and there's the spoils somewhere. No spoils. It's just this divot in the ground. We should have been out there with tweezers picking everything up. And for some reason, we all just stood up at the exact same time and said, well, I guess it's time to go home.
Oh, no.
Wasn't out of fear. Don't know. And I'm not trying to introduce any type of woo thing to it, but all four of us at the same time said, yeah, let's just head home. So then to add to the I don't want to add to the woo, but to add to the woo that then also happened. My cousin and I had a camera. I had a Sony Bloggy Touch camera. It took 13 megapixel pictures and it took HD video. Very portable. It was very cheap. It was a great camera. It was my initial squatching camera. And my cousin had a little point and shoot. He had just replaced the batteries that morning to take pictures. So I said, we're going to head back this way in the direction of where we could hear it pacing back and forth. I said, if we come across whatever this was, I'm going to have my camera on and ready to get video of it, of whatever it was. So we get out, start walking out, and I notice that my camera is completely dead. This camera had never died on me ever before. I could literally go pull it out right now. I haven't touched it in 5 years. I guarantee you it'll power up. But my cousin, who had a point and shoot, who had put fresh batteries in the camera that morning, also had a dead camera. Would not work.
No.
Until we got out of the area, and then suddenly they started working again.
Dude, that's weird.
It's weird, and I can't explain it, but it did actually happen. Not only did we just all stand there, we should have been looking for hair samples, and I should have collected the scat sample, even if it had some residual DNA from being rolled in hand by someone.
Yeah.
It was clearly rolled in hand. It did not come out of the human or any body like this. It was a perfect sphere, as if it had been rolled that way, but full of grass as well. So I don't know if it was scat or if it was a mud ball that was just, I don't know what it was. But to have found another one identical to it a quarter mile away on the same property a year and a half later in an area that is cleared out, basically. And so we're walking out, and it wasn't until we're on the ride home, basically, I turned to my cousin. He was riding with me, and I said, did we see a Bigfoot today? I said, did we just see a Bigfoot? That was the first time it had ever even been mentioned that we might have been looking at a Bigfoot. Even though that's what we were there for, it's what we were literally testing them in the woods for. And I called my wife immediately, and I said, I think we just saw a Bigfoot. And of course, she was like, oh, great, good. That's great. I mean, she doesn't want to like think I'm making it up, but, you know, show me the proof. Where's the proof, you know? But I wasn't even convincing at that time, because I was like, did we just see I don't know. And it wasn't until we got home later, I called up my cousin and I said, write down everything that happened as far as you know it. And I'm going to write down everything that happened as far as I know it. And then we're going to see if those kind of match and mesh. And I put the report up on our Facebook page, and it was pretty fresh when I wrote it. So when I wrote the report out, it's pretty lengthy, and it was pretty fresh when I wrote it. The only parts that I've added to it are when we went back to the site to verify the height, and when we went back to the site on another time and found another clearing and everything. But our stories matched up, our heights matched up. Everyone smelled it. basically.
Everything was matching up like perfectly.
Everything was matching up. And how we didn't know at the time, because even when it was walking away from me, I was trying to go after it. But as it went away, instead of running towards it, I tried to climb a tree to get an elevated look at it. I was wearing coveralls, and the trees down there are so skinny. It was comical because I was climbing up and sliding down and climbing up and sliding down, and I couldn't ever get any type of elevation. I don't know why I wanted elevation to look down on it instead of just going after it. But something told me physically, you're not chasing this thing. You're not going after it. And it wasn't fear. And I keep wanting to really impress that upon people. We never had that fear response that some people talk about when they get zapped or anything like that. We didn't have,
just kind of like,
we didn't have any GTFO in us, basically. It was just like we were looking around for a little bit. We took our pictures. We talked about what had happened. That's when my buddy come back and said, I thought that was y'all just walking behind me back there. And we didn't even put two and two together, even at that time, that had he turned around, he could have had a face-to-face. He just thought it was us and wondered how we got back where we were so fast. And so it was really weird how it ended up happening. The smell I'll never forget. That's just been burned on my brain. So if I ever end up coming across that in the woods again, I'll know I'm in the presence of one. And to this day, you know, we would go out. I would go out religiously because for a certain amount of time I was unemployed. So I was available to go squatching 24/7. Basically. So I would say there was a good 2.5 years prior to that sighting where we were out 2-3 times a week and every weekend looking and going to places where reports had been, having rocks thrown, hearing tree knocks, having strange things happen, having strange smells happen. And then since I had that sighting, had literally, it's 8 years later, literally nothing happened since in the woods.
It seems like that just seems like the typical thing to happen, honestly.
And I don't know why, because my goal has always been, you know, I want my wife to have a sighting now or have some experience that cannot be explained away as, okay, that was obviously a bear, or that was obviously, you know, something explainable. I want her to have an experience. And so we would go out, Pruitt for a certain length of time was doing a lot of BFRO expeditions, and then Lori Wade took over. So we were going to all of those. We were going into these really great areas, and zilch, nothing has happened since then. And I don't know why it is. Since that day, I've literally had nothing identifiable that I can sit there and say, I can't explain it as any other thing besides Sasquatch.
No, I'm kind of in the same boat, to be quite honest, but it's just, man, dude, it's just the way Sasquatch works with us, I guess, but who knows?
And you added on my entire goal. So I'm not here to prove it to mankind.
One second, I might lose you first, the audio.
Okay.
My phone's all right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
Go for it.
So my entire purpose in getting into this was never to prove it to mankind. My entire purpose was to basically 100% prove it to myself. I was 99% sure that they existed based on the evidence that I had read, based on witness testimony, based on the research that I had done. I believed they exist. So I went out so much because I wanted to know 100%. I need to have a sighting. I need to see something that says absolutely 100%. So that literally contributed a lot to me having nothing happen after, because the enthusiasm about going out as much as I did prior to the sighting really kind of waned. Started getting into the conferences more, started getting into the networking a little bit more, making friends in the field, making friends at the conferences, and literally found more enjoyment out of that, of having those associations, being able to hang out with a group of people like at the 50th, where we're not the outcasts. It's the bartender that's the outcast, you know, because they don't believe. It's the other people that are listening to our conversations. They're the outcasts. We're the ones that have had so many stories that mesh together and mean so much. And having that type of association with folks has meant so much more than getting out in the field sometimes. And then, you know, ended up taking up a lot of video stuff because video technology has become so readily accessible as compared to when I was in college in the 19. So it was all hand done back then and very expensive. And now the computer that I'm on now, I can make an entire movie out of and have it be Hollywood quality. And just started getting into that and making the videos around that. And I've found that when I do make the Bigfoot videos, more so than anything else, I've been on stage with Willie Nelson. I have a video where I'm on stage with Willie Nelson.
What?
Right there looking at the crowd, and it got maybe 80 views, whereas I have a Bigfoot video that has almost 10,000. So
what in the world?
So, I've done some incredible things here locally, and to have my Bigfoot videos be the ones that really take off, because like I said, there's a lot of people out there who are afraid to come out of their Bigfoot closet, and they're watching these things on the sly. So they're searching for Bigfoot videos, and they're searching for Patterson Gimlin, and my video pops up. And that's how it ends up getting the most views, basically, is all these people who aren't readily wanting to just come out and say, okay, there may be something here.
And that's so funny because, like, everything Bigfoot related that I've done, that's how I've made all my connections that I've made. Was pretty much through Bigfoot, and I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. That's the reason I made connections. It's because of something I grew up watching that was filmed, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. Like, I know all these cool people, and like you and all that. And
it's amazing to me that some of my best friends now have resulted from a childhood fascination. Literally.
it's the same, yeah.
It's literally like having a hobby, but it's a hobby that so many people aren't willing to admit they're into. And then literally having some of my best friends in the whole world, I would literally, I don't have a problem with, somebody staying in my house or having access to anything because I trust them that much, basically. And you can't do that with everybody. And here it is from Bigfoot of all things, to make such connections and to make such good friends with it. So,
and it's funny because, like, normally people who don't believe in Bigfoot, like normal people, they're the weirdest to me. And people who believe in Bigfoot are normal to me.
Right. It's like, okay, so I know you're normal because you've actually taken time to look into something, whereas you're not just being ignorant of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know you've at least, I can speak to you on an intellectual level because I know you've actually done a little bit of research. And then, you go to the conferences every now and then, who to avoid and who you can mesh with. There's always those people that show up, basically. So you kind of get a feel for who to avoid. There are some people that are 110% into Bigfoot and have done no research. So the research is basically their own imagination. And so you can tell usually within 30 seconds of having a conversation with them, it's like, okay, somebody's patting on the head, come rescue me, come get me. Or
wait, I think we're getting a phone call. I gotta take this.
Okay.
No. I was like pretending a scenario.
Oh yeah, it's like we'll have a queue with somebody who's like, okay, if I do this, please call me so I can get out of this, If I give you the sign, you got to come rescue me.
Exactly.
Which now the Bigfoot, because my wife I get to do a lot of great things because my wife is so daggone beautiful, basically. So it's almost like that George Costanza access into the new realm. So whenever she's by my side, I get access to all this great stuff. So I usually end up rescuing her more than she usually ends up rescuing me, because somebody will zero in and suddenly, start talking about their story, and then they start crying. And then, somebody at a conference, when they're telling your story, they always cry, or it's always this traumatic thing. And it's like, oh, rescue me. You got to give the signal, come get me. I'm trapped.
So I wonder how many of those people who say they're 110% but don't do anything, and they have a Bigfoot encounter, I wonder how real they are, like how true it is.
You separate the wheat from the chaff a lot, because we used to do a lot of investigations, and I would say 90% of the personal investigations I did were verifiably false or misidentifications. Now, in their mind, they 100% have a Bigfoot occurrence or a Bigfoot near their property, or they went out one day and saw a Bigfoot. And I never let them onto that. I just lead questions on of what happened then, or what'd you do next, and what else can you tell me about it? And most of the times you can get them on a track where suddenly the fantastic gets involved. And once the fantastic gets involved, you know that their story is not valid, because most, like my Bigfoot sighting, it wasn't fantastic at all. It was quite mundane and boring. And that's how most of them end up being.
That's how mine was. Well, I've had 3 times I've had something happen. One of them I actually got on FLIR. I got a FLIR video of one.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the greatest video ever. It was quite, it's not exciting by any means, like you're saying. Like most of them.
It's not to say that it can't happen. It's not to say that. Yes, please. Oh, it's going to give me some more wine. It's not to say that it can't be fantastic, but when you're talking to me and you're talking about a normal story and then fantastic gets added to it later, it's like they're trying to impress you. And that's when it ends up being that it's probably not a valid story. And I would say that would be 90% of the people that I've talked to would be that way. And I never like confront them about that and say, oh, you're full of crap, get out of my face. I listen to their story, I respond to their story, and keep it in mind. But you got to look at the location where they're at on Google Maps. Is there a means of egress? Is there a means where a Sasquatch can get in and out? Is there a water supply? Is there a food source for them? If not, then, your story is just not meshing up with everything. And there's several stories that just don't. I get into an argument with Cliff Barrickman quite a bit because there was a story locally that I've been on site where the guy says Cliff has this picture of a handprint in the snow when the one time it snowed here in like 15 years. And I've been to the area where the handprint was supposedly photographed. It's not feasible that a Sasquatch lives there at all. It's in the middle of town. It's literally in the middle of I-20 and these huge busy roadways. It's just not possible. And we go back and forth on it because he's talking about the morphology of the handprint and all this kind of stuff. And I'm saying, look, I've been on site at the area. There's no means of egress. Yes, there's a water supply, but there's nothing to eat and there's no way out. And there's no way a Sasquatch would sacrifice being seen in an area like this.
No way.
So, yeah, that's yeah.
You've had enough. You have to take a drink of wine.
Yeah, but I would say, when I do reports, 90% of them, unfortunately, I don't want to say that they're hoaxing us. There is that every now and then. You can always tell when somebody's hoaxing if they've given the report to somebody else before or they give it to somebody after as well. It means to me that they're shopping their experience, trying to get somebody to push it forward so that they can then turn around and say, oh, I got, so-and-so from this Bigfoot group and he thinks my story is real. Ha, ha, ha. Every now and then you'll run across those. But I would say the rest of them are all just misidentifications. Literally at a time of year when acorns are falling and you hear stuff falling in the woods, it's not Bigfoot throwing rocks at you. It could be acorns. It could be chestnuts falling. It could be date nuts falling or coconuts, depending on where you're at.
Well, that's a good point because I was up at Onion Lake with Rowdy and Robert and this guy Glenn. I don't know if you met him or not.
I don't think I'm Glenn.
We were up at Onion Lake and we were doing some knocks. And we did a knock, or I did a knock, and maybe like 30 seconds later, there was a knock back. I want to believe it's Bigfoot, but at the same time, I'm not, I'm willing to accept that it isn't, because Robert thinks it could have been a pine cone falling, off a tree from the noise that I made with the knock, and it could have shooken the pine cone loose, and the pine cone could have fallen on like a dead like log that was laying there or something.
Yeah.
And it's very possible, you know? And it's like you gotta use Occam's razor a little bit when you're Bigfooting. You don't wanna always think everything is Bigfoot, because then everything will be. Even somebody behind you walking will be Bigfoot. You're like, did you hear that?
Right. Because I had that happen. It was the very first time when I first officially started getting into Bigfoot. My old Squatching buddy, he had an article in our local free rag here. It's called the Metropolitan Spirit. It's kind of like just a free weekly paper that comes out that talks about movies coming out and concerts in the area. And the front page was Bigfoot in the CSRA. And it was an interview with him. And so it had his contact information. And I called him and talked with him. And he was talking about an area that I was very familiar with. And this was in late spring. So the sun was still out about 7 p.m. And I looked at the wife and I said, look, get in the Jeep. We're going for a ride. We're going to go out to this area. I knew where we were going. And we're just going to walk in the woods. It was a train trellis that goes over the Savannah River. And there's an island, basically, where the river kind of forks off and makes a little river. So you've got this 3-mile island, basically. And on the north end of the island is 3 holes of golf course. And the rest of the golf course is on the mainland. And there's a trail on the land side, and I knew how to get to it and where and everything. So the wife, of course, going along. I'm very enthusiastic about my new little project. And I think this is about 2009 or 2010 probably. And so finally we come across this giant felled pine tree, and it was kind of fresh, but it was not so fresh where it was still full of water. It hadn't started rotting yet. So it had a really good wood timbre to it. And I had a wood baseball bat with me in my backpack. So I stood up on top of this thing and I did a really good wood knock on it. And it was just loud and beautiful. It was a gorgeous wood knock. And my wife's just staring at me, just, like, oh, look at my husband doing his little wood knock thing. Until about 15 seconds later, when there's a response from the island on the other side of the river.
Yes.
And suddenly I look at my wife and her eyes are the size of dinner plates. And she's mouthing, what the F was that? And I'm just grinning from ear to ear, because I knew the area, and I knew, but to know that my old Squatching buddy had several reports come from that island. And we come to find out that besides the 3 holes of golf, that entire island is private property that is only used for hunting. But because it's so close to the suburbs, it can only be used for bow hunting. And there's no way to get to the island unless by boat. So it's never tread upon, ever, ever, ever. And so
wow.
we think that there's a family of Sasquatch that comes up and down this creek every now and then when evidently some food source is available, and they use this island during the summer as a hiding place because no one ever goes there. And then lo and behold, a few months later, 6 kids were jumping off the train bridge into the river, which was a pastime that I used to do when I first moved here. And they're headed back at night, and all 6 of these kids are walking on the train trellis. It's elevated probably about 20 feet off the ground and then goes over both rivers. They're walking back to go home, and this 7-foot chestnut-colored giant muscular Sasquatch walks from underneath the bridge and just walks away from them. Doesn't run, doesn't look at them, just walks away from them. We got that report from them and went back, and only 3 of them would come back. The other 3 would not come back to the area at all. They were too scared to even come back and talk to us. And we took them to the area. We kind of separated them, started asking questions about it. And lo and behold, I mean, these kids weren't the type of kids that were highly educated. So to come across with some of the information they came across when we asked questions about how it looked, tell me about how it was shaped. Did you smell anything? What happened when it walked? You couldn't have read this online, basically. It had no phantasm to it at all. The only phantasm about it was how scared they suddenly became, because this was a really large, for the size of it, it could have jumped up and grabbed them at any time. And all they're thinking about is a monster in the woods is going to eat them alive. And they could get off the bridge fast enough. And we've had so many things happen in that on that island, basically. And if you look at it on Google Maps, you're thinking there's no way, because it's right here in the middle. It's right there on the river, and there's neighborhoods. But right where they're at, they have a means of egress. They have a means to get in and out, and no one ever goes there. We've had so many things happen right there. One night, oh God, I'm rambling, but one night, me and my old squatching buddy went out. He said, "You got to come out." We'd put a baked basket. We hung it from the train bridge in the middle of the island, and we put apples and a jar of peanut butter with the lid almost off. And he had gone out the night before, and he did a rock clack. And he said, something kind of came up, and he could hear something in the woods. So we went back the next night, and he drove there, and I actually put my kayak in and boated up to the area. And so we get up in this elevated area. We go out into the middle of the island on the train bridge. We do a couple of rock clacks really loud, and then we go back to the land side and just kind of sit there and wait. Lo and behold, we could hear something approaching us on the other side of the river as the sun went down. Of course, we saw nothing, but we could hear something walking around. Then all of a sudden, stuff started dropping in the water. Little pebbles started dropping in the water. This is a very calm river, basically. So anything that would drop in the water, you could hear it. There's beavers and stuff in there, but these were just tiny pebbles or something just dropping in the water. So after a long amount of time, we sat there. We didn't say anything. We didn't communicate. We were just kind of listening. We just decided, okay, we hadn't heard anything forever. Let's go home. And so I had to go down this hill to get back to my kayak, and he was just going to walk the train tracks back to his vehicle. And so I lit up my flashlight down the hill so I could see the path to get down to the kayak. And immediately when I hit the flashlight, there's a giant wood knock directly from where we were hearing the noise of what was moving around in the brush, and we could hear it bipedally stomping away after the wood knock. It scared us so bad, we both jumped and started laughing immediately because it scared us so bad. But we thought it was long gone, and it had never left. It was watching us the whole time, and it was, like gunshot loud, and you could hear it stomping off into the woods as if turning on the lights had insulted it, basically.
Jeez, I guess.
And then I had to get in my kayak and boat past this area to get back where I was coming.
Oh.
So that was, but I never saw anything after that. I'd gone down and seen some shine in the woods, but somebody put reflectors in the woods as a path to an old deer stand. And I was seeing the shine on that. Didn't see anything else that night, but so many other things have happened on that island, and you'd never believe it. So I don't discount when people like tell a story and it might be in the middle of town, but you have to look at it, and I have to look at it and see, is there a way for the Sasquatch to get in and out? Is there enough water for them? And is there enough food for them to eat in the area? And why would they be there? And
exactly,
it's perfectly obvious to us that they're there because of in the sun. You can see through this island to the Savannah River in the wintertime, but in the summertime, you can't see 1 foot into the island. It's so thick with vegetation that you can live there successfully and never be seen.
There's your reason right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're over an hour almost.
I got another great story if you want another one too.
Let's go for it. I have a little bit of time left.
All right, one more story. You can edit out some of the my ums and ahs and stuff like that, and maybe we'll keep it in time. We got invited by this group called the Enigma Research Group. It's one of the best outings I've ever been on because it was a group of psychics and remote viewing people who were doing Bigfoot research, and it was absolutely fantastic. We went out, I'm trying to remember, it was Wayne Ford who lives in Athens. He's a newspaper man. He was invited, and he asked if we could come along, me and my squatching buddy, and we did go along. And I think Alex Midnight Walker was part of the group, and everybody was very nice during the day, and we all split up at night and did our own little things. I ended up in this field on top of this mountain, and I remember it because it was the first time I've ever physically seen the Milky Way. There was no light pollution. We were so far away from everything that I actually could see the Milky Way in this clear night, basically. And we had set up two other people in ghillie suits in the woods at like 4:00 in the afternoon. It was a guy and a girl, and we had buried them in ghillie suits, and they were going to watch us in this field as we played music and chanted and did all this other stuff. And it was absolutely amazing. These hippies come walking out of the woods later, and they said they heard us, and they were up there to harness their chi, and they just had to be a part of what we were doing because it was a drum circle. And such a great weekend.
That's awesome.
But anyway, the two people that were in the ghillie suits, they claimed they saw some orbs flying through because they had night vision and everything, but no Sasquatch or anything like that, nothing on the FLIR. So we get back to camp, and when this happened, it affected me so much that I actually had Lori Wade do a BFRO expedition at this area, basically, because it so impressed me. It's not only is it a great area, but it's accessible. It's camping. It has pit toilets available and everything. So it was really great to have a large group like a BFRO expedition would be there, and to have them come to you, because we were literally camping there and going all these other places in small groups to do these things, and nobody really had anything happen. But we get back to camp that night, and we're sitting around the campfire, and there's really large stones around this campfire. I'm sitting on one side, and my squatching buddy is sitting directly on the other side. And the girl who was in the ghillie suit, and I can't remember her name, I think it was Jessica, she's sitting to my right. It's about 3:00 in the morning, and the talk is getting very dreamy, and, like we all need to be in the bed anyway. And on the hillside behind me, we're in this campsite, and on the hillside behind me, I can hear something moving back and forth. I can hear something rustling, making a noise. So no one else really hears it, but my squatching buddy. I looked at him and I said, "Did you hear that?" And he's like, "Yes." It's like, and I said, "Where are you located at?" And he's like, "It's right behind you. It's up the hill. I would say, maybe 40, 50 yards away, but we could hear it rustling back and forth." Then all of a sudden, we're sitting around this campfire, and I hear a thud behind me. And I look, and there's a rock rolling.
What?
And so my squatching buddy looks at me, and he's like, "Just don't say anything yet. Let's see how far it goes. Let's see what he does." And nobody else is picking up on any of this. Like, everybody's around the campfire, and nobody's picking up on this. So a couple more rocks come in, and finally, the way I see it, he's throwing rocks at the girl who's at my right. He's throwing rocks on the ground to try and kind of get her to move, basically. And it's kind of like I had done an expedition with Steve Coles in New York, and he said his theory of this, which I happen to believe, is that we're their TV. When we go to bed, they hate it, but we're their entertainment. They get to watch us act like idiots in the woods, basically.
I love that.
And if you add any element of surprise to it, you get to watch us act like bigger idiots. So some more time passes, and finally a rock comes flying in, and it hits her chair. And she notices, and she looks down, and this is a girl who we dressed up in a ghillie suit, probably had to pee herself as she's sitting in the woods for 7-8 hours, motionless, very tough girl, very impressed, suddenly freaked completely out because she said, "What was that?" And I said, "Well, it's a rock." And she said, "Where'd it come from?" And I said, "It's coming from that thing that's been walking on the hill behind us for about 30 minutes. Freaked out, got up, ran. What? Just really freaked out. And me and my squatchy buddy, we're just kind of laughing because stuff like that kind of happened to us regularly. And I guess it had never happened to them before, but they didn't know what to do about it. And it ended up, they didn't go grab equipment or do anything like that and head up the hill. They all took off to their tents and went to sleep.
What?
And I stayed up for a little bit and didn't have anything happen, but I woke up early the next morning. I woke up before anybody else because I had some squirrel that was chewing a pine cone above me, and it was landing pine cone bits on my tent. And the sun was hardly up, and it was so annoying that I ended up waking up because I was so annoyed by it. So I got out and got the fire going again, and it was really cold that morning. So I'm sitting in my chair, wrapped up in a blanket next to the fire in the same seat, and I can still hear it moving in the hillside behind me until the sun came up, and then there was nothing. Went up to the hillside and found nothing.
You probably just hung out
it didn't throw any rocks at me that morning. It was only throwing rocks at her that night.
Hey, they like women, I guess.
That's what I always tell folks whenever they say, whenever you have an expedition, if you don't have women and kids on your expedition, it's like when you go to the zoo and you see the baby penguins. It's just like us. We're like, oh, look at how cute. Nobody wants to see some dude out in camouflage with his guns, chewing tobacco and spitting and scratching himself and drinking beer and littering. But you bring out the wife and kids, you're going to have a Bigfoot experience if they're in the area. I guarantee it, because we are their TV. I fully believe that. And when you bring kids along, they want to see the kids be rambunctious.
No, that's so true. That's good advice for anybody listening. So, Jeffrey, thank you for coming on tonight. It's been a pleasure.
No
worries. And I need to have you on here again.
I've got more stories. When I was asked to speak, because I started speaking at certain conferences, I looked at my wife and I said, I have nothing to speak about. And we were sitting around with my new squatching buddy Sandy, and he's like, of course he calls me a name. He's like, dude, you have a million stories. Every time we're sitting around a campfire, you talk about something that happened. All you have to do is just talk about that one time, and you can go on for an hour and a half about stuff that happened. You have a million stories. And it's not something that I, really publicize or anything. It's just that we went out in the woods a lot, and we had a lot of interesting things happen until my sighting.
That's the best kind of thing, dude. The stories are so much fun to. They're so much fun to tell, and they're so it's fun to have them too. But I thank you again for coming on. It was so much fun.
Anytime you want me back on, I'll do it.
For sure. And I hope you have a good night. And until next week, we're the Bluff Creek Project Podcast.